What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Tycoon Talks. Look, I know we got a late night edition going on. You know, it's so interesting, man. You set these time frames, and I'm like, all right, we want to start this thing at 8 o'clock. It is now 8 o'clock Central. It is now 9:25. It is what it is, man. When you live an entrepreneurial life and you have a family, sometimes things don't go the way that you want it to go. But that's life. And it's so interesting that how everything has been going today went the way that it did, because tonight's topic is about adaptability, right? And so, we're going to jump right into it here, but I will give you guys some insight. So I had this thing set up. Everything's ready to go. We're rocking and rolling. We're getting ready to go back to school. So kids have, all of my children have these meetings, meet and greets, teachers, back to school, all that stuff. So we're getting into that. So you say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and jump into this thing, make sure that I'm supporting my kids and doing all that. You get in, you get that done. I come back, my other children telling me stuff late, got to take baths, we're doing all of this stuff. And at this point, I'm just laughing because I'm like, it reminds me of the scripture where it talks about that there's a way that seems right unto a man, but then the end thereof is death. And so the reason why I leverage that scripture is not the death part. We're not focusing on that. We're focusing on the part that it says a man, or that seems right to a man. Because I was like, all right, we got everything good, and that's just not how it happened. But that's okay. That's all right. So I will say this: we're going to jump right into tonight's class. So I want to take you guys back to when I'm in Pittsburgh, right? This is 2010. I'm having the best training camp that I've had. I'm penciled in to be the starting right guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everything is going right? So I'm riding this emotional roller coaster all the way to the top. Some things happen. Doesn't work out the way that I wanted to. And the next thing I know, I got a black trash bag in my 2008 GMC Denali. I got my head on the steering wheel, and I'm wondering, what am I going to do now? And what I've come to realize is there's many athletes that are faced with that question. They're faced with that reality. As a matter of fact, the average career for a professional athlete in the NFL is only about 3.3 years. So when you think about everything that you sacrifice and that you put into something only to get that amount of time, it can be heartbreaking. And the reality is that a lot of athletes attach their identity to their sport. And so anybody that's been following me long enough, you know that that's what we talk about. We talk about purpose outside of the game, right? That's what this channel is about. And the thing that we've been studying for the past, five or six episodes is the athlete identity foreclosure and what that means. And so today, what I want to focus on is I want to show you that the studies of this thing and the numbers of this thing are finally starting to catch up to everything that athletes have been saying that they've been feeling when they retire. As a matter of fact, there's up to 39% of elite athletes that talk about the psychological distress that takes place within their mind after they retire. 39%. You know what I mean? And so the reality is, when you look at it compared to the workforce, that's almost double. Right? And so what I want to talk about is why the system is set up the way that it is, what the athletes are dealing with physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and why are we seeing the things that we're seeing as it pertains to them taking, I would say, drastic measures once they retire. And if you've been watching the news lately, you've been seeing, a lot of our brothers and sisters in sport unaliving themselves. You've been seeing a lot of them talk about going through depression. As a matter of fact, I'm reminded of the young lady, Brittany George, she was an Australian athlete, and she was doing an interview, and she basically had said like she was playing the game as long as she could because she realized that, whenever she was done playing, that was going to be the end of her life. Now, you come to find out that the young lady was battling some serious depression, but a month after she had made that statement and she went on that interview, she was no longer with us. And as I look at social media, I don't know if it's the need to be wanted. I don't know if it's the lack of resources that a lot of these sport entities lack. I don't know if it's the fact that they just don't care, if they care at all. But what I do know is there's a serious problem and a serious phenomenon that's happening in the athlete world as it pertains to the lack of identity after sport. And so what I want to talk about is what athlete identity actually means. All right. So we're not just talking about, I played sports, but who am I now? It goes way beyond that. What AIF is it's a construct to where you start playing sport at a young age, at a real young age, right? And people around your circle, whether that be parent, whether that be your neighborhood, your environment, coaching staff, whatever it is, they see your athletic ability. And as they're seeing your athletic ability, they automatically stamp you as an athlete. Hey, this person is extremely gifted, extremely talented, and it can be seen at a young age. You can see those kids. You've seen kids playing in AAU. The ones that are super gifted, super talented, right? And they stand out. They stand out amongst everybody. And so what happens is that now you take on that identity. Why? Because the elation of what happens, the cheers, the fact that people pay attention to you, the reward mechanism that takes place, winning championships, winning, if you're soccer, scoring that game winning, kick, you're football, making that game winning tackle or catch, basketball, the shot. There's all of this, there's this elation that comes within sport. And so now what happens is you never get to do what most people do, right? The general population does, which is called identity exploration. You don't get to do that. You automatically take on that role. And so as you continue to climb through the system, right? Middle school, you go from middle school to then high school to college, professional. You've never looked outside of anything other than sport, anything other than athletics. And so what we know to be true is that at some point, irregardless of the time frame, that sport will end. And so we're taught to operate within the system to become elite within the sport, but we're never given the proper tools and the skill sets to create a transferable bridge that allows us to continue to operate in that eliteness in life. And so most people, whenever that sport ends, they spend their time in what psychologists call identity moratorium. I like to call it the wilderness. They spend their time in this timeout. And in this timeout, in this dark place, they're trying to figure out who they are without their sport. But the difference between somebody that's trying to figure out their purpose that has never played at that level is that they're doing it in the limelight, right? They don't get the opportunity to go and explore other things without eyes being on them because they operated at such a high level for so long that people know them, right? I've seen this multiple times with high caliber athletes that I have buddies that I've played with that household names. Of course, I'm not going to name them on this show, but household names. And I've had real conversations with them. And The amount of uncertainty that they have within their future just because they don't know who they are beyond their sport is eye-opening. And to be honest, it's been those conversations that have led me to take on this challenge of understanding what athlete identity foreclosure is. So I'm seeing some of these comments. You guys are active tonight, but one of the questions that the research asks is, why do athletes attach their meaning, the meaning of what they feel their life is, their life meaning to sport, and fasten it so tightly, right? And so as I'm thinking about that question, I start to think about my own life, right? So my story, I grew up in A-Leaf, Texas. Sport was everything for me. When I was 14 years old, I actually left the country to play basketball overseas, all right? And I can remember really understanding what was happening in the moment. Like to know that, man, a game that I love has taken me from an environment that cultivated me, that molded me, but never gave me culture, right? It never gave me culture. And what I mean by never gave me culture is there was a mentality within the place that I grew up. It's simply this: you're either going to be an athlete or you're going to be a drug dealer or you're going to die. That was the space in which I grew up. But when the game that I was extremely passionate about, that was basketball, took me to Spain, to Barcelona, to Valencia, to Madrid, it opened up my eyes to a whole nother world and a whole nother way of thinking that I never would have known was possible. So when you have a sport do something like that for you, at least for me, I'm like, man, I got to do everything that I possibly can to have more opportunities like this. And so when I get back from Spain, I put the basketball down, I pick the football up, I become the number one tight end in the state of Texas, the number 7 player in the United States of America, and I have over 50, 60 scholarships to any school that I want to go to, right? So it wasn't a fact of, or it wasn't an issue of, do I have scholarships? Where am I going? This was about what's the best fit for me, right? And so when you're awarded those opportunities because of skill set that you possess in athletics, it makes it pretty hard for you to not think that this is what you're supposed to do with your life. It makes it pretty hard to think that there's nothing else outside of this. And I talk about the system all the time. Like, that's the way that the system operates. The system wants you to only focus on this one thing. Don't look to the left, don't look to the left, don't look to the right, right? This is all that matters. And the reality of it is that while you're in that space, in the confines of that time frame, that is true. But the difference in the thought process is it's true as it pertains to what to focus on. It's not true as it pertains to that's who you are. And that's where we mess up as athletes, is we believe that we are the game that we play, right? So within that story, what is the point of it? What you come to realize is the stronger the stronghold is on you as it pertains to the identity that you've attached to sport, the harder the crash landing when that sport leaves. Right? I remember reading an article about Chris Bosh. And Chris Bosh went through what's called involuntary retirement. So you're talking about a guy out of Dallas, Texas, basketball guy, basketball savant. This dude knows the game. NBA champion, right? One of the best at his position in the prime of his sport. And all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, snap of a finger, just like that, the game is taken away from him because of a blood clot issue. Nothing that he did. And so he talks about in his blog what that felt like, right? How his value, the value that he thought that he had of himself diminished, how his confidence of what he had in himself diminished, how he felt he was worthless. Now, mind you, this guy's an NBA champion. He's made millions of dollars, has a beautiful family, right? He has so much to live for outside of what it is that he did. But that's what the sport does. It keeps you so narrow-minded that you can't be grateful for the things that are around you that you've actually built with the talent that God has given you. And so when you understand how important you take the game, or athletes take the game, when you really dive into and listen to the things that they're saying, it's not so hard to understand why they believe that when they're removed from that space, it's like a death, it's like a mourning. Because for a lot of these guys, started playing, you think about it, started playing ball when they were 5, 6 years old. I mean, if you retire at 36, that's 30 years of you doing one thing. That's 30 years of routine. That's 30 years of system. That's 30 years of training, right? That's 30 years of off season. Like that's 30 years of in season. Like your life was scheduled and structured. And now you have to figure that out for yourself. So what I want to do is I want to bring to light, before we jump into the data, because that's what I'm looking at in my notes. I want to bring to light that although we see a lot of professional athletes speak about the trouble of transition, there are a group of athletes that transition seamlessly. So everybody's crash landing, right, or everybody's landing is not the same. So the question becomes, all right, then what is the difference? Because if we can find what the gap is and we can put a name on the gap, then I'm of the mindset that now we can position that to be able to find real solutions for people that struggle with life after the game. So let's jump into the data, man. All right, so there was a study. All right, this is what I was reading. There was a study that was done in Belgium, the Netherlands, Australia, as well as China and some other countries. There was over 400 people that took this survey. So it wasn't a small survey. Like, this was a true, like, cultural test. And so what they measured was how much identity respondents felt that they lost, whether they kept their old tribes, meaning their teammates, their clubs, the people that are within their circle, or whether they built new ones, and how that mapped to life satisfaction. Come on, let's speak tonight. Depression and physical health. So these were the things that they were monitoring after these athletes were removed from their sport. So here's a finding that I wanted to actually sit with you guys that are listening tonight, right? It said losing your athletic identity hurts you through exactly 2 doors. It drains your sense of meaning in life, and it also drains your sense of control over it. Right? So this is just not a vague sadness. These are 2 specific nameable things. But here's the interesting thing about it. The direct hit was actually stronger in the Chinese athletes. And the researchers think it's tied to things like, Olympic state focused, Olympic state funded systems. And, they have more of a collectivist type of culture. So, basically where the team is like the identity, like even stronger than, football, basketball. Like when you're talking about the Olympics, like it's literally us versus the world. Like it's a whole different level, right? Here's the good news, though, as I'm looking at a lot of the different notes that I took. This is the part that most retirement content, when you look at all of the people that are talking about this thing, they skip a lot of this entirely, right? They talked about multiple group memberships before retirement. They were connected to more than just the team, right? So this is, and so what it's saying is although they had their team, although they had, the individuals that they, were going in and competing with, they had other groups and they cultivated other groups while they were in sport. So what does that do? Well, what it does is, remember I talked to you earlier when I mentioned the identity exploration. Psychologically, we are creatures that desire to be around collective groups, right? This is why we have things like interest. Like, what are our interests? The Bible says that that birds, what does it say? That the birds flock together that are of the same kind, something to that effect, right? Every beast, that's what it says. Every beast likened unto its kind, right? So what it's showing you is the same thing that's true in nature, right, is true when it comes to human connection. And so part of human connection is social groups. So like you'll have athletes that are interested in music, so they hang out with musicians. They're interested in acting, so they hang out with actors. I know Bijan Robinson is somebody that he's interested. He does some acting classes. You have people that like Ndamukong Suh, like he wants to know about money. So his one of his good partners was Warren Buffett, or is Warren Buffett, right? So we find these different groups outside of what we're doing to be able to position us in a way to cultivate other interests that we have. And so the ones that did that, what the study shows is they were the ones that when it came to transition, it was an easier aspect of life for them to move, horizontally from one aspect of life, that being sport, to the next. And so they found out that it protected them in two ways. One, keeping some of those old groups alive and building new ones after. So both counteracted the damage, not fully, right? It didn't take away everything, but it was extremely meaningful. So what it's saying is, not only were they able to keep their friend group within the sports cycle, right, which is important. Like I still kick it with a lot of my guys that I play with, because there's a language there that we speak. And I'm going to give you an example of that in just a second. So they kept the people that they played with. They kept the people that they were, in alignment with. But then they also held on tight to the new circle of individuals that they were building that collectively had the same interest. So when I say that there's a different language, I had recently went to an NFLPA event, NFL, so National Football League Players Association event, right? It's called a Summer Getaway. Phenomenal event, right? Here you have a plethora of NFL athletes that played from, you got guys that played in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, all the way up to the mid 2000s, and some guys that had just retired. And it's always interesting, irregardless of the time frame of when people played, how we all speak the same language. I can remember talking to some older guys about like their training camp experience and just hearing the stories of like how it was for them. And, there was a guy that I talked to, he played with one of the same teams that I played with. And he was talking to me about the space of where we used to have training camp at, and how different, like just not only the area had grown, but how the team had shifted from when he played versus when I played. And man, we were just elated to be around each other and to share these stories, to share these, these gridiron stories, man, about, certain guys that we played and individuals that we blocked and getting beat on plays and winning on plays. And it was just so cool to see that we come from different walks of life. But when you put all of us in a room that's all spoke that same language, that meaning the language of professional football, man, we're all the same. We're all the same. And there were some people that were probably dealing with some real issues. But this is the importance of being around, groups, social groups. And I'll get into the studies of why that's important too. But just from my own experiences and the experience of others, I've seen it. I've seen people come out of some dark places being in the right groups at the right time, right? Because when you're in different groups, one of the things that it helps you to realize is that you're not alone. And I believe a lot of athletes believe that they are alone as it pertains to when they're trying to figure out life after the game. And so when you're in a group, you come to find out that the people that are within that group, a lot of them have gone through the same thing that you've gone through. They've experienced some of the same things that you've experienced. And they've overcome it. So those become the individuals that you want to lock in with. They become the mentors because now they can give you real advice. And in my book, What to Do When It's Done, I talk about a framework called the 3-ring method. And in the 3-ring method, you have your inner circle, your middle circle, and your outer circle, right? And your outer circle, these are the individuals that are, like your social media following, maybe people that you've met from, over the years. You don't really have like a lot in common, but they want you to do well. They wish you the best, right? Like your cheerleaders, your fans, things of that nature. Outer circle. In your middle circle, these are individuals who align with your values as it pertains to certain objectives that you're wanting to obtain. So like business partners or, podcast friends or something of that nature. Like, you guys understand what I'm saying? Like those individuals that, hey, we have a common goal in mind. Certain teammates that you're not, super connected to, but you guys have a common goal in mind. Those would be your middle circle. But then you have your inner circle, right? And your inner circle are the individuals that don't care about anything that you have going on as it pertains to sport. They only are there because of you, right? And a lot of times you look at family members, but these can be close friends as well, right? Your significant other, right? Your children. Those are the people. I call it inner circle because those are the people that are close, near and dear to your heart, right? They understand who you are. Now, why do I bring this up? Because when an athlete retires, you move towards family, right? Because you're essentially your foundation has been removed. And so now you go back to the closest thing of a foundation that you have, that being your inner circle. And they can help you in a lot of ways. But the one thing that they can't help you with is understanding how to navigate the journey of retirement after sport, because they've just never been at that level. They've been around that level, but they don't understand exactly what you're going through. So they can sympathize or they can empathize for you, but they can't sympathize because they don't get it. And they try. This is the reason why having mentors in a social group of individuals that have done what you've done is so important. So important. Because now the conversations are conversations of likeness, right? Every beast likened unto its kind, right? As Zephaniah 2:1 says, gather yourselves together, O nation not desired, right? Why would the good book tell us to gather together? Because it understood who we are as social creatures. Like we have to be around individuals that understand us, right? That just makes the meaning of life better. To know that, hey, bro, I know what it feels like to see the money running down and you don't have any idea what you're supposed to be doing to be able to stop it. You didn't plan for this. You had unexpected things take place, or maybe you've been in a divorce, or, maybe you were in a bad investment deal, or maybe you were swindled out of cash, whatever that thing is there, because people have been where you are as it pertains to having those experiences as an athlete. They can walk you through it, but then they can also understand the emotion that you're going through because they went through it themselves. Right. So multiple group memberships before retirement, being connected to more than just a team, protected people in two ways, keeping some of those old groups alive and building new ones after. Both counteracted the damage, right? Not fully, but meaningfully. So in the study, there is a measuring metric that they use. It's called the social identity model of identity change, or the CIMIC for short, right? In this methodology, what it's looking for is they have their different data points and things of that nature, but ultimately what they're looking for is they're trying to understand the athlete mentality, how it correlates to identity, and how that identity operates within the effects of every other action, right? So how does the loss of identity deal with the mind, right? Well, one of the things we know is it like, if you don't know who you are, it can lead to depression. It can lead to indecisiveness. It can lead to extreme outbursts, frustration, anger, right? There's a multitude of things that happen spiritually, right? It can leave you spiritually low. Physically, because you deal with depression, low on spirit. Now you start to consume the wrong things, whether that be alcohol or drugs or fatty foods or whatever. Now you start to find yourself in this rut to where you're essentially living to die. And so the research is trying to figure out the correlation between an athlete's identity and foundation being removed and the negative effects that it has on that athlete as they're trying to figure out who they are in life. And so the social identity model of identity change, or the CIMIC, is what they call it. I like to call it the whistle effect. And so here's the three moves that you see within what I call the whistle effect. You see loss, you see reconnect, and you see rebuild. So when we talk about loss, right, this is something that you have to name as an athlete. You have to name it honestly. I was watching Ryan Clark on The Pivot, where he was talking about him getting fired from, I believe it was ESPN, and the effect that had on him because he had poured so much of himself into that job, right? And essentially what I realized is like, hey man, he's talking about his identity being attached to ESPN. He had already experienced that as an athlete. And then he believed that he had found something within ESPN. And then that thing now has been removed too. So it's like deja vu. He's going through it again. And it was a very interesting conversation that he had as it pertains to what he poured into it, how much he loved the job, how he even was willing to compromise some areas of himself to be able to stay a part of that entity. And he's not the only person, removing it from athletes to just people in general. I believe we all have had moments in our life where we've compromised at least a little bit who we are to stay a part of a group. We've all been through that, right? And for people that say that they haven't, okay, well, I commend you, because that's not most people's story. Most people want to be wanted. And over time, you realize that you want to be wanted by the right people. But at the same time, like, that desire and that need to be a part of a group is extremely strong. And in studies, research shows this. That's the reason why they do all of these different experiments, where there was an experiment where a young lady went to a doctor's office and there was 5 people sitting there, and then the bell would ring. And when the bell ring, everybody would stand up. And then when the bell ring again, they would sit down. And so this went on, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And so within the first 5 minutes, she's just looking at people like, okay, what's happening? But then after minute 6 or 7, she starts standing up and then sitting down, right? So it just shows you the behavior of individuals as it pertains to how we are, creatures of not just creatures of habit, right? Because I know we say that a lot, like, oh, I'm a creature of habit. You are a creature of habit, but your habit, a lot of times your habit is inspired by your social economic environment, right? And so you'll change that habit. We saw that with COVID. There's a lot of people that had non-negotiables. Well, those non-negotiables went out the window when real life happened. And it's not to judge or I'm not using that example to judge anybody. I'm just sharing with you that when it comes to a collective group, you have to be a extremely strong individual not to adapt to things that are taking place around you, if that is your value, right? If that's your value metric, if somebody's doing something that's against your value metric, okay, obviously stay strong in that. But we've seen that doesn't always happen. So the study, when it comes to the loss part, the study points to, you're not weak for grieving a role, you're human. Pretending you don't feel it is what delays recovery, right? The other part of that is the reconnect. So in the reconnect, you have the identity, the continuity pathway, and these are things that are dealing with pre-existing groups that are non-sport related. They can help you keep, breathing life into the right now, right? Before the transition even fully lands. So that's what we talked about earlier, where the people that were still playing and they were building groups outside of their sport, those were the ones that created that transitional bridge. And it was in the landing for them when they did transition out of sport was a lot smoother. All right. And then you have the rebuild. So this is the identity gain pathway. The question that's asked is, what new room are you walking into? This is where it connects to one of the things that I like to call clarity to creation, which is also in my book. So in clarity to creation, there's the clarity, there's the identity, there's the vision, and then there's the creation, right? And so what I mean by that is, in order for you to fully start to identify your purpose outside of sport, you have to get really clear on what's happening around you right now. Okay, look, I'm no longer in this space anymore. I'm no longer the person that used to do this. I'm no longer the athlete Tony Hills. Now I'm just Tony Hills, right? Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but we have to call it out. We have to address it, right? It's similar to, people that deal with substance abuse. They tell you all the time, the first step is to admit that you have a problem. It's the same thing when it comes to the transition of sport. The first thing is to admit, like, I'm no longer in this space anymore. This is not what I do, right? So now what happens is now you can start to go through that identity exploration space, which then allows you to start to understand, okay, this is who I am. These are the interests. Here's where I believe my purpose is. And now you can create a vision on that. And once you create that vision, as the good book says, write the vision and make it plain. So now you can run with that. And so when you talk about purpose, where is purpose found? I believe, this is my belief, I believe purpose is found at the intersection of your God-given talent and the people that you are called to serve. And I get this from a biblical principle that says that the greatest among you shall be your servant. And so once you understand what your God-given talents are and the people that you're called to serve, now it's all about figuring out what tool you're going to use to serve. Right. So from a business perspective, my calling is to be able to do what I'm doing tonight, to be able to help athletes, right, to give them subtlety, knowledge, wisdom, and skill to understand how to turn their purpose into profit using the platform that the game gave them. That's what I'm here to do. Right. I've lived certain experiences. I've had failures and I've had successes. And I believe that because of that, I'm qualified to be able to speak in that particular niche. Right. But that took time. That didn't just happen overnight. We're talking about years of, ups and downs, ebbs and flows, losses, the whole nine. Like, I got a lot of battle scars, right? But I wouldn't change it, because all of that is what made me who I am. And all of that is what allows me to do what I do and to be able to help the athletes that I help, right? And so we're all going to go through that wilderness space. That's the rebuild. So in the rebuild, we already explained that. We talked about the identity gain pathway, right? So I want to read this verse because I think it's so important as it pertains to what we're talking about, as it pertains to rebuild. But it comes from the Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7, verse 27. It says, "In being but one, she can do all things. In remaining in herself, she maketh all things new. And in all ages entering into holy souls, she maketh them friends of God and prophets." Why is that important? Because what it's speaking to is it's speaking to wisdom. King Solomon is widely regarded, at least in the biblical lens in Christianity, as the wisest man to ever live. But what I believe many people miss about King Solomon when he's writing the book of Proverbs and the book of Ecclesiastes is how he explored all aspects of life. The proverbial good and bad, right? Perceived good and bad. He went through everything. And through that, he was able to garner wisdom and expound on that wisdom and give that wisdom to the reader. In the rebuild phase, excuse me, in the rebuild phase, let me get some water and talking. All right. So in the rebuild phase, you're now in a space to where you've had some experiences. You're able to leverage those experiences to be able to help others. So a lot of times we believe that the things that we're going through because of us. There are many times the things that you're going through is to be able to give you the answers to help other people, because the God knows that you can handle it, right? He says he doesn't put anything on you that you can't bear. And I specifically can remember me having a particular injury when I was in high school and going through the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs of what that was like in recovery and what's going to happen with my scholarships and all of these things, right? Fast forward a few years later, when I'm in college, this young kid comes in and has the exact same injury. I mean, to the T, I'm talking the same injury, even on the same side of his body, the same thing. And I noticed that, he would always come to me and ask me certain questions. Now, he didn't know, I don't believe he knew I had the same injury, but he would always come and ask me questions like, man, what does the healing process look like? Or what, like, I don't know what, he just had all these different questions. And I was able to walk him through like the levels that he's going to go through, not just physically, but also mentally. And how you need to continue to stay strong, continue to work, continue to have faith. And it was all the things that was told to me to help me overcome that same injury. So here I am thinking years prior that, why is this happening to me? When in reality, it was happening for me to take this information and to give it to him. And he ended up getting recovered from that injury as well. How is that relative to what we're speaking to tonight? Well, we're talking about the rebuild phase. And in the rebuild phase, you're leveraging your hardships. You're leveraging your experiences. You're leveraging your actions, your thought process, everything that you used to get you through a particular adversity, a particular situation. You were able to persevere through that. Now you can leverage that to be able to help other people. What that does is it starts to fill the void of identity foreclosure, because now you start to find meaning in serving others. You start to find purpose and serving others. And you start to realize that the game, it was just a small portion of your life. As a matter of fact, that reminds me, I keep my notes everywhere, but that reminds me of this. So in my book, I'm going to read this. In my book, What to Do When It's Done, I have a section in here called Turning Setbacks into Setups. And so what it says is this: adaptability requires perspective. What feels like a setback may be a setup. So when I moved from pass catching, to pass blocking, I did feel demoted. In reality, I was being prepared for longevity. I had bounced around from team to team. I had felt unstable, yet each experience expanded my network and resilience. So when I left football, I mourned the end, yet the end allowed me to build a business that impacts more people than my arm length ever could. So what you come to find in that portion of the story that I wrote was that here I am thinking that, man, what do I do now, man? The game is over. I'm done with it. I don't, what is my purpose? What is my meaning? And lo and behold, all of the experiences from getting hurt as being a top tight end and catching passes and all of this, to getting hurt in high school, moving to offensive line. Now you go from pass catching to pass blocking, right? And then those ebbs and flows and ups and downs. You go through all of those things. You get to the league, you win a Super Bowl, you have a starting job, you get cut, you get picked up again, you're right back in that same starting role, you get released again. Like you go through all these ups and downs, and it's like, man, I've been through all of these things only for me to be able to use and leverage every one of those networks and every one of those experiences to build a profitable business. I didn't know that at the time. Right? I guess that's the reason why they say let go and let God, put it in God's hands, because his plan is bigger than ours. So when you look at it, like I said, they call it, the research calls it the social identity model of identity change, or CIMIC. I like to call it the whistle effect. And so again, we talked about that, like the loss, the reconnect, and the rebuild. But here's what I say. When the whistle blows, it's not a full stop, it's a comma. There's a continuation that's happening with your life, right? Here's what I say as we get ready to wrap up. Retirement doesn't end your identity. It ends your excuse to avoid building the next one. You don't need your old locker room back. You need a locker room. Any room where people know your name for a reason that isn't your stats. You got to expand. The athletes who go dark after the game didn't lose their talent. They lost their tribe. Right? So another scripture that aligns with that is Ecclesiastes 4:9, where it says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he have not another to help him up. One of the main things that I see with the athletes that I help and that I coach is they move into a space of singularity. They go into isolation mode because of pride and ego. Like the system has taught us, like we don't express our issues, like no excuses, no explanations, only results. Nobody cares about your problems. They're probably happy that you have them, right? These are the things that were told to us as athletes. And so we take that same mentality into life, and it goes totally against the things that God says. God says to be fruitful and multiply. God says to gather together. God says to, as you see here, to have 2 or more, right? God is moving in a space of, for lack of a better term, group economics, right? But the world tells us to be by ourselves. Here's the thing. When does the devil attack? When you're isolated. when you're isolated. Having a strong circle of friends and a strong circle of family keeps you safe. It keeps you safe. And I believe one of the reasons why we see so many of these athletes harming themselves is because they haven't been given the proper tool set to understand how to deal with the darkness that's happening within their minds, the darkness that's happening within their spirits. They haven't been able to open up. One of the biggest things that starting this channel has done for me, and I didn't even know it was doing this. Like when I first started this channel, right, the whole goal was like, I'm learning this thing called athlete identity foreclosure. I'm going to talk about what I'm learning. Lo and behold, this became so therapeutic for me to be able to talk about my experiences and the things that I dealt with and how I've been able to help other people deal with certain things. It turned into something totally different. And it's so much freedom. It's like I get to release all of this information and all of the things that I went through and just put it out there for the world to see. And I'm cool with that because I know it's going to help somebody. And I'm excited about the people that it does help, right? But this is how I found what I need in order for me to continue to move forward and to continue to build identity and continue to align myself within my purpose, right? So the beautiful thing about when you find your purpose, you discover your purpose. First you discover your purpose, then you define your purpose, then you design yourself for your purpose, and then you deploy it into the market. That's the methodology. And it's so fulfilling to be able to give words of wisdom or to be able to help people to get to their ideal destination or whatever it is that they need to be a guide. It's so fulfilling to do those things. Like I have more fulfillment doing this than I ever did when I played. So I want to challenge y'all, everybody, every athlete that gets on this channel and watches this episode. I want you to name one group or community you were a part of before your career or big role that's what I was saying. Okay, so name one group or community that you were a part of before your career or big role that you let go quiet, right? And I want y'all to drop it in the chat. So to understand that even more, to make it clear, all I'm asking is, what is a group that you were a part of while you were playing that once you started moving away from the sport, you kind of let that group die down to the side? Was it a social club? Was it a golf group? Was it a chess group? Whatever it was, I want you to drop that in the chat. And I also want to know why you did it. What made you do it? So here's the close. Here's what we're going to wrap up with. Here's what I want you to leave with. You can't buy back an identity, and you can't wait for one to show up either. You build it on purpose with people starting before the whistle even blows. So before you, I always say this to my athletes. I say, listen, the best time to start working on your transfer bridge was 5 years ago. The next best time, right now. Right now. Don't do things alone. Don't do things alone. Express the things that you're going through. And understand that you have people out here that have been through what you've been through and they're willing to help. The olive branch has been extended, but you have to do your part too, right? You can have all the faith in the world, but faith without works, as the good book says, is dead. So for all those listening tonight, I appreciate you joining me. I want you guys to like, share, subscribe. If this message resonated with you. And for everybody, I always leave the call to action for anybody that is looking to understand where they are in the process of athlete identity foreclosure. There's a complimentary survey on my website. So if you go to tonyhills.com, you'll scroll down to the bottom and you'll see the what to do when it's done survey. You just click on that. And it's a 10-question survey that has been put together by my team and all of the psychological data and studies that we've done to show you and share with you where you are and what next steps look like. And so that's our gift to you guys for all those that take advantage of it. Appreciate y'all joining me tonight. And remember, as always, that your sport was your platform. It's not your purpose. Your purpose is found at the intersection of your God-given talent and the people that you're called to serve. And once you understand your purpose, you'll understand your life. It's your man, Tony the Tycoon. I'm out.